Behaviorism, formulated by John Watson in 1913, it focused on objective and observable facts rather than subjective ones. It thought, hey, can we create some sort of approach to psychology in that we don't need to look at mental processes like feelings or motives and consciousness? Rather, can we look at the acts themselves? Can I judge a person from how they act and from what they do, rather than what they think? So, behaviorism, Watson proposed to limit it to quantitative events such as stimulus and response, effects of conditioning, physiological processes, and the study of human and animal behavior. Now, obviously, this sounds a whole lot like functionalism, and indeed, it does, because with its emphasis on activity as an adaptive function, behaviorism is seen as an outgrowth of functionalism. Behaviorism's goal was just basically to take psychology into its next level of evolutionary knowledge. It thought that psychology was just a fake field. Well, not really a fake one, but it thought that in order to confirm that psychology was indeed real, we have to take it into labs. I have to see these things in front of me. It saw these quantitative events, the stimulus response, the effects of conditioning, physiological processes, and the study of human and animal behavior. It saw them as things that should be investigated through laboratory experiments, that yield objective measures under controlled conditions. So, just like I said, in contrast to other at the time approaches, I want to see my objective facts in front of me rather than just treat someone as crazy because they act like it. I want to treat someone as crazy because their behavior is crazy, because they are serial killers, they have intrusive thoughts. They act on these intrusive thoughts. Rather, I do not want to delve into these thoughts. I want to delve into what this person actually does. You can see this in the prison system and how people see criminals. Once you do one criminal act, people will see you as a bad person forever. Your job opportunities will lower, and your reputation in general would be just incredibly bad. The assumption that behavior, including its acquisition, development, maintenance, can be adequately explained by stimuli and response. Stimuli and response based principles of learning. It rejects any study of the mind or consciousness. It says that we should focus on stimuli and response, and that's it. Behavior theory attempts to describe environmental influences on behavior, often using controlled studies with lab animals. You see this a lot with Ivan Pavlov, for example. The dog experiment that he did, he sees people he doesn't see them as dogs, but he sees that this behavior that the dog was influenced by, well, people also do it on the regular basis. It encompasses historical approaches to formal theorizing, such as of those Clark L. Hall, Kenneth Spence, and the operant theory of Skinner, the operant theory, the one that I explained yesterday, as well as contemporary approaches to behavior in USA. Now, apparently, Ivan Pavlov is the father of behaviorism. I don't think that is. His father is actually John Watson, because he was influenced by Ivan Pavlov's ideas. Now, strict behaviorists believe that any person behaviorists believe that any person, regardless of genetic background, of personality traits, or internal thoughts, could be trained to do a specific task, well, with the right conditioning. John Watson published a classic paper in 1913, The Psychology as the Behaviorist Views It. It is best summed up by the following quote from Watson: "Now they give me a dozen healthy infants, well-informed, and my own specified world, to bring them up in, and I'll guarantee to take any of them, any at random, and train him to become any type of specialist I might select, doctor, lawyer, whatever, even beggarman and thief, regardless of his talents, pensions, tendencies, abilities, vocations, and race of his ancestors." So this is best explained or best summarized by saying anyone can be trained to do a certain behavior. That's it. A person, well, if they were bad, they were good, it does not matter. If even if there were like two twins, let's say, this is the genetic background thing. If we got two twins, put one of them in a good environment, put the other in a very poor and unsustainable environment, they will turn out to be just like their environment, not how they actually were created in the womb. But wait, not enough brain damage yet. Behaviorism and the approaches of behaviorism, it has two: methodological and radical. Methodological, basically, well, founded by John Watson, it focuses solely on observable behavior and excludes any reference to internal mental states, like thoughts, like feelings, or consciousness. Now, Watson believed that these things that I just talked about, the internal mental states, are not objectively studied, so we should disregard them completely. Alright, so key tenets of it is that behavior is a result of learning from environmental stimuli, that all kinds of behavior is, well, I learned it somewhere from stimuli and response. Mental states like emotions or thoughts are considered irrelevant, just like I said, because they are not objectively studied. They cannot be objectively studied. Psychology, to be considered a true science, should avoid discussing internal processes. So this guy was reaching for something. Then we've got the more logical, radical behaviorism, which was created by Skinner and his operant theory. We can accept some parts of internal events, but also these internal events are, well, their behaviors themselves. They subject to the same principles of conditioning and learning, but he did believe in his operant theory. Operant theory, which was, to recap, reward, and then you'll do it again. Well, some kind of unfavored outcome then, and you will stop doing it. So if I reach to touch this phone, I hit myself, alright, well, I won't do that again, and that is my unfavorable outcome. Key tenets of both observable behaviors and private internal events are considered behaviors that cannot be analyzed specifically, scientifically. Skinner emphasized operant conditioning, just like I said. Radical behaviorism views thoughts and feelings as behaviors, as learned behaviors that are governed by the same environment principles as observable actions. So to summarize them, key differences: methodological behaviorism dismisses internal processes entirely, and radical, well, it accepts them, but it accepts them under one condition: that they are themselves are behaviors. And it means that they should be studied using the same methods as observable behavior. More on radical behaviorism, just one more thing. It looks at one's past and present environment and the reinforcements within it. Well, and it likes to predict how this person will act in the future, either by positive or negative, just like I said, with the reason that this person did something bad before, did something good before. It's rooted in the theory that behaviorism can be understood by, just like I said, the present environment and the reinforcements within them. Now, classical conditioning, behaviorism, the Pavlov behaviorism, a type of learning in which an initially a neutral response, the conditioned stimuli, when paired with a stimulus that elicits a reflex response, aka now the unconditioned stimuli, results in a learned or conditioned response. So, for example, the sound of a tone may be used as conditioned stimuli, and food in a dog's mouth as unconditioned. So after repeated pairings, namely the tone followed immediately by the food, the tone which was initially had no effect on the salivation, will elicit salivation even if the food is not present. So if it was 12 p.m., which is when I usually eat my lunch, if I see 12, well, before I started this habit, if I see the time 12 o'clock, well, I wouldn't have any type of reaction. If I saw food at any time, I would salivate, I would get hungry. But now, after the conditioning that I was put through, 12 p.m., 12 p.m., 12 p.m., and lunch, rice. When I see 12 o'clock, I immediately get hungry. I might salivate. I mean, I don't, but that's basically what it is. So 12 o'clock was the conditioned stimuli. The unconditioned was the food that I would receive at the time. Now this method is called the Pavlovian conditioning. Responded conditioning, type 1 conditioning, type S conditioning. It was discovered in the early 20th century by, Ivan Pavlov. What are the methods of behaviorism? You've got behavioral training, activation, token economics, aversion therapy, exposure, flooding, and systemic desensitization. We'll get an example of each. Behavioral training, well, it works best with kids with, I want to say autism, but let's just keep it very plain here. I'll give an example. Teaching a child with ADHD to improve classroom behavior by using rewards for staying seated and completing tasks on time. Well, behaviorism in general works best for autistic children. But anyway, well, actually, yeah, it does, because you don't really understand how they think, but studying how they act is a more logical approach to it. And then we've got behavioral activation as an example. A patient with depression, well, the psychologist would recommend them to do stuff that they used to enjoy before. Like it might be like exercise or going out with friends or just anything that they used to love and enjoy. Then we've got token economics. In a classroom setting, students earn tokens. Token economics, students on tokens. Token economics, as an example, students in a classroom can earn these currencies to exchange later for playtime or some sort of prize. Well, they might get early time of, they could leave the classroom, like let's say 5 minutes or 10 minutes before everyone else does. This is token economics. And then we've got aversion therapy. A person trying to quit smoking might receive mild electric shocks every time they attempt to smoke a cigarette. So the unpleasant stimuli will basically teach them to not touch the cigarettes. This is pretty useful, I think. I mean, I use it myself. I used to use it sometimes. Like, for example, I used to have this like little band that I would wear on my hands, where if I touched my face or my acne, listen, we do that. But anyway, if I had acne, it was my little attempt to stop myself from scratching them. and ruining my face even more. So if I caught myself do this, I would hit, and then I would take this band and it would um, hurt me. And that is the unpleasant stimuli, aka the shock. Exposure therapy. An example of it would be if a person with a phobia to dogs, let's say, or cats, let's say cats, I can gradually try to expose him to this fear that he has. Well, it could be like showing him a picture, first of all. It could be seeing dogs from not dogs, a cat, seeing cats from a distance, and then gradually, eventually getting this cat to his frontal or anterior. Flooding. This is uh, this is what a person with a fear of heights is immediately taken to the top of a tall building to confront their fear all at once. So let's say children that are afraid of swimming, water. I can just take this child, yeet them, just throw them at the water, throw them at the pool, and see if well, they get over it. Systemic desensitization. So examples: for someone with a fear of flying, the therapist might start by having them imagine sitting on a plane, then progress to watching videos of planes, and finally taking a short flight throughout the process. Relaxation techniques are used to manage anxiety, as the patient is gradually exposed to the fear-provoking stimuli. Humanism is a philosophical and ethical stance that emphasizes the value of human beings, their capacity for self-realization, and the importance of reason, rooted in both ancient philosophy and modern psychology. Now, this was in the Renaissance era, of where Petrarch, the guy that studied classical Greek and other Roman texts, came out of nowhere and said, alright guys, we are going to prioritize human experience and individuality over supernatural belief, advocating for personal growth, self-awareness, and moral responsibility and education. This is basically what humanism, the Renaissance humanism psychology is. What about the modern humanism psychology? We've got two key figures, Carl Rogers and Abraham Maslow. Now, the more important name, Abraham Maslow, created the Maslow pyramid, where he basically said there are 5 needs: physiological, safety, love, esteem, and self-realization, which is absolutely impossible to reach for reasons that I will explain right now. Self-actualization is basically where you finally reach the point of just being happy and fulfilled with everything that you have. You do not want more, and we do not want more as in we do not want more goals. We don't want more. We don't want food. We don't want love. We don't want anything. I'm just happy with what I've got. So usually you can only reach this when you're eventually dead. This is my opinion, and my professors says as well. But before that, if I want to reach the self-esteem part in where I have confidence, achievement, respect of others, and respect by others, I have to finish the love and belonging part, of where friendship is the family and sexual intimacy. Before that, I have to go through safety, and before safety, I have to go through physiological needs. Safety includes security of body, of employment, of resources, of morality, of family, of health, or property. Yeah. Now, what I just explained is the hierarchy of needs. We also have 3 other very important humanism focuses or topics. one of which is becoming a fully functioning person. We've got peak experiences, which are just um, they're kind of like the highlight of your life, let's say, and self-actualization. So, second of all, becoming a fully functioning person is the one who is in touch with their deepest and innermost feelings and desires, the unconditional positive regard. It plays an essential role in just fully functioning as a person. Or, in other words, having a healthy personality and being open minded, being open to new experiences. The hierarchy of needs, of what I just explained. Um, that's the hierarchy of needs. It was the first one to. The hierarchy of needs of Maslow, which was a paper that he published. It's called A Theory of Human Motivation in 1943. And then again in the subsequent book, Motivation and Personality. And then we've also got the peak experiences. This is probably the most important point, or second most important point after the hierarchy of needs in humanism. Peak experiences are often described as transcendent moments of pure joy and elation. Say that you bought your first car. I am ecstatic right now. My my brain receptors don't even realize what I just got. It's crazy stuff. What about in Saudi, to be specific, when you see your wife for the first time? Obviously, we are more rational and less chaotic people than the Westerns. So when I see my wife for the first time, I am ecstatic. I'm very happy. Or when you see your birth of your first child, that's basically what peak experiences is. Just pure joy, like you just fluctuated upward, and it does not fall down. Like it's only gonna fall down maybe like after a week or something, a month maybe. Well, it depends on what kind of person that you are. The memory of such events is lasting, just like I said, and is often likened to them to and it's lasting, and people often link them to a spiritual experience as something. According to Maslow, one of the best ways to think of peak experiences is to think of the most wonderful experiences of your life. For example, being in love. Something that, uh, according to Gail Privitz's study, to the three characteristics of peak experiences, we've got fulfillment, significance, and spiritual. Fulfillment is just peak experiences that generate positive emotions and are intrinsically rewarding. Significance, well, if it leads to an increase in personal awareness and understanding, it can serve as a turning point in a person's life. Say that, um, say that you are addicted to smoking, right? And then out of nowhere you got cancer, but then you actually beat cancer, which is just crazy, right? I beat cancer and now I am ecstatic. And now it's just the significant parts of it literally lead you to changing your life. Spiritual. During a peak experience, people feel one with the world and often experience a sense of losing track of time. You know, when life is just so good that you lose track of time. Basically, what spiritual is. One last thing. One last thing, the self-actualization part. According to Maslow, it is important to note that self-actualization isn't about being perfect or achieving all your life goals. It is a state of mind that allows people to approach problems, relationships, and needs with acceptance and understanding. Uh, it's actually not as complicated as it sounds. So let us continue. Humanism psychology, characteristics of self-actualized people. They have peak experiences. They have continuous sense of appreciation. involves acceptance. They are realistic. They are problem-centered. Are independent. They have a value privacy. They value privacy. They have a philosophical sense of humor. Spontaneity is a sign. Also have a sense of purpose, and they're just focused on their journey. One more thing about humanism that I again forgot to mention is that, well, actually I did mention it. It focuses on self-growth. It focuses on self-improvement. More on that, yeah. So all the famous movements that are going on right now are directly uh, derived from humanism psychology. So it's very nice actually to see how everything in the world is actually influenced by these schools. Like we've talked about behaviorism and how it influenced the prison system and how it influenced the educational system also. But now we also get one to humanism. So one more point to humanism, my favorite school of psychology. So in contrast to behaviorism, cognitivism, cognitive psychology focuses on mental processes like thinking, language, memory, perceiving, attending, well, mainly through inferences from behavior. The cognitive approach, which developed in 1940s to 1950, diverged sharply from contemporary behaviorism in emphasizing unseen knowledge processes instead of directly observed behaviors, and arguing that relationship between stimuli and response was complex and mediated rather than simple and direct. Cognitivism basically says just because you can't prove that something isn't there doesn't mean that it's not. That's what it says to behaviorism. In a sense, to explain more, behaviorism said that there is stimuli response only. Cognitivism says there is, yes, there is indeed stimuli, but there also are other stuff that stimulate my behavior in my head. It's not just repetition, let's say. Other and more stuff like my memory, my thinking, and my language, my culture, my other stuff, basically. One very familiar name, John Piaget, with his genetic epistemology theory, said that we need to study the origins or genesis of knowledge. Epistemology established by Swiss psychologist John Piaget. The term genetic has been restricted to the mechanism of heredity in the English-speaking world. The term can be coined to mean development. So, genetic development. So in 1967, Ulrich Nasser introduced the term cognitive psychology, which he defined as the study of processes behind perception, transformation, storage, and the recovery of information. Its concentration on the higher mental processes also contrasted with the focus on instincts and other unconscious forces like psychoanalysis. More recently, cognitive psychology has been influenced by approaches to information processing and information theory developed in computer science and artificial intelligence. Wow, very big stuff. So what we need to actually focus on is the application of cognitive psychology. We got CBT and we got REBT. CBT, which is cognitive behavioral therapy, and REBT, the rational emotive behavior therapy. Cognitive CBT, which was, by the way, made by Aaron Beck. I think this guy died recently. And we have Albert Ellis, the guy that made REBT, probably long gone. Now, influenced by Darwin's theories, Peter Kropotkin is the founder of evolutionary psychology, an approach to psychological inquiry that views human cognition and behavior in a broadly Darwinian context of adaptation to evolving physical and social environments and new intellectual challenges. It differs from sociobiology mainly in its emphasis on the effects of natural selection on information processing and the structure of human mind. So, question: do thoughts evolve? Do thoughts evolve? is, well, if I'm like, okay, well, let me talk about myself. Let me talk more about myself. I have 300 IQ, right? It's obvious. Everyone knows this. If I bring a child to this world, will my child have 600 IQ? Do thoughts have an evolutionary context? So if Elon Musk created rockets and stuff, then the other person will create a I don't know, some even faster way of transformation into outer space. Will he create teleportation? That's basically what evolutionary psychology is. The its principles permeates different sub-disciplines within psychology, including clinical science, cognitive psychology, and neuroscience. So, for example, the influence of evolutionary theories can be seen in studies conducted, particular clinical disorders like anxiety and depression, are in fact psychological adaptations or in assertions that emotions evolve to serve primary functions. This is where we finally agree on something. Is depression a way to cope? Is it like a final resort of the human mind to get you to actually straighten up? And some people would say no. Some people say that depression is just a glitch in the system. Obviously, with the way I'm putting it right now, I disagree with that. I think that depression, anxiety, any type of anything is a coping mechanism. Now, why? Or let's just focus on depression here. Depression, the human brain is incredibly smart, right? If it sees you as incapable in doing your basic life stuff, I've done my bed today, finally. If I hadn't, it would see me as incapable, so it would look for an alternative solution. Um, did I can I tell someone else to do my bed? Okay, well, we cannot. That's also fine. I'll just give you next year brain damage so you could actually straighten up and go about your life, because the brain knows that you actually do care about your life. So if I give you depression, you will fix it. Well, mostly. Come on, man. I think depression is just the last resort of human biology. Founders of evolutionary psychology, according to Noam Chomsky, perhaps anarchist thinker Peter Kropotkin could be credited as having founded evolutionary psychology when, in his book in 1902, Mutual Aid, A Factor of Evolution, 1902. Let's remember that year. He argued that human instinct for cooperation and mutual aid could be seen as stemming from evolutionary adaptation. Cosmeds and Tooby, David Buss, Morgan Wilson, Martin Daly. Martin Daly have been leaders in both theoretical and empirical development of modern psychology. So this is another more important point in evolutionary psychology: natural selection. So as human progressed, and as our technology also progressed and developed, we saw a very sharp increase in human population. So what does that mean for us? It means that, well, more competition, obviously, but back then there was very little people, well, compared to now. So natural selection was just doing its part there in not letting anyone weak live. But now, since we have technology, there are lots of weak people. So one theory says that, hey, maybe these new mental illnesses and new diseases come up from where? Because there are lots of weak people. So natural selection is trying to eliminate as much weak individuals as much as it can. So the process by which such forces as competition, disease, and climate tend to eliminate individuals who are less well adapted to a particular environment. I love this because in order to actually live in a world like this, you actually have to be a person that's, well, trying, right? You can't just be not doing anything in your life and then expect to get respect, let's say, or never mind, get a place to live in a planet like this. This is a more sociopathic idea, but it's nature doesn't really care about what you think or like about your feelings. So if you're weak, you should be. That's basically natural selection. It is the fundamental mechanism driving the evolution of living organisms and the emergence of new species, as originally proposed by British naturalists like Charles Darwin and Alfred Russel Wallace. Evolution of the brain. The concept that the brains of complex animals have evolved over many billions of years from a network of simple nerve fibers connecting various body areas as in primitive multicellular animals. At a more advanced stage, a neural axis developed to connect and integrate peripheral neurons and to house cell bodies. Okay, so this is a very cool idea. This is why I generally do think that humans are aliens, alien-like organs. Our frontal lobe is way too developed for other creatures. So, still later, collections of neurons with control functions developed at the head end of the spinal cord, as in the brains of higher invertebrates, birds, fish, and reptiles. Exactly. From those concentrations of brain tissue evolved in forebrain with its highly evoluted cerebral cortex of mammals, especially prominent in whales, great apes, and most importantly, my Homo sapien brain. So in mammals, conscious wakefulness, attending orienting sensory perception, immediate memory, and so forth, associated with the evolution of the thalamocortical system, which is the nerve fibers connecting to the thalamus, basically, of the mammalian brain over the last 200 million years. Close functional parallels may exist in birds, some cephalopods, and reptiles such as salamanders and crocodiles. The last one, evolution of intelligence, the process by which intelligence has developed from earlier and generally simpler species to later and generally more complex species. There are many theories of how intelligence has evolved, but most emphasize some kind of Darwinian natural selection process. So this is just peak non-theistic thinking, I think. Basically says that evolution favors skills that are just more useful over the eons for adaptation to environments than skills that were less useful. So we have something called, just a question, right? Like, how does the body know what to choose and what actually works for it? How does the body know when to actually go through evolution? Maybe there is a very obvious answer to this question that I do not know of, but for me, this is like the first thing that came up to mind when I heard Charles Darwin's theory, when I first learned about it. So, yep.